Hi guys, thank you for joining us again today. My name is Rudolinda Mtsingwa and I am with
Langa and Chichi.
Yeah, Langa just short for Lange, not the sun. So today we're talking about climate change. Not many people want to talk about climate change at a peer-to-peer level. We're cool talking about all other things, just not this one. But as amplifying girls' voices through digital arts, we would not be doing justice to our movement if we don't talk about climate change, because it disproportionately affects girls. Girls are the most affected, especially girls who look like me and Langa and Chichi, girls who come from Zimbabwe, girls who don't come from the elite nations, or girls who don't come from positions of privilege. So when we have disasters that are caused by climate change, for example, when we had cyclone Itai in 2019, now we have Freddy, when we have floods in Cholocho, when we have all these things, it means that people get displaced. It means that houses get washed away. People are forced to stay in temporary shelters. And what does that mean for the safety of girls? What does that mean as far as sexual exploitation is concerned and things like that? But above and beyond that, each and every single day when someone wakes up in Cholocho and they think of, oh, I have to get water for us to cook, for us to clean, how does climate change affect that? And all these other issues that girls are faced with on a daily basis. So the typical situation in short, when we have people staying in a temporary shelter, we have a lot of girls being vulnerable to sexual exploitation at a critical time when they don't have much access to SRHR education, when they don't have access to things that they can even use to protect themselves. Here we're talking about condoms. We're talking about girls who also don't have access to basics like menstrual health products, like sanitary wear, pads, tampons, all those things are not there. And we're not saying that this is because someone decided that these things shouldn't be there. But the reality is that these things aren't there because the priority is, do we have a tent to sleep in today?
Do we have food to eat?
Yes. Are we all alive? Did everyone make it out of the house alive? Do we have food to eat and things like that, such that other issues that affect girls on a daily basis are forgotten about or are not given the importance that they deserve. I'm sure you can agree with that, Langa.
Absolutely. So as you were just introducing our topic today, I just thought of it's a situation where a natural disaster is occurred, flooding, for example, the Chimanimani disaster, and the clinic has been destroyed. What does that mean for a young woman who needs access to sexual and reproductive health services, family planning, things like that? So you realize that these challenges are already there with or without climate change, with or without a disaster. So imagine the magnitude that is brought about by natural disasters that are brought about climate change. So it's a really, really big cause for concern.
And also I feel like when we look at even menstrual health, at the end of the day we have a disaster, people living in temporary shelters. Most of the priorities at the time would be maybe getting, the basic toiletries, groceries and things like that. They don't really prioritize the fact that girls also need pads and things like that so that they are able to actually get through their periods. But then we're looking at the fact that periods are a monthly thing. Periods are always there, and at some point that's not really a priority.
And climate change also affects the availability of food. There's a lot of food shortage, not only for people who are hit by natural disasters of a higher magnitude, but in lived reality, everyday examples, someone in Kezi, someone in Kai, someone in Cholocho, their yields are not the same. They're just not getting as much crops as they were before, but you have to eat. And while you have to eat, you still have to walk 20 kilometers to school. Then comes in things like transactional sex. I remember reading about, I think it was Mfuchahai in Escotini, that during, for example, COVID-19, a lot of girls dropped out because they opted to marry the illegal minors were there, the Gweshas were there because they could get food. And I think in a situation where you've been hit by a natural disaster, really you are forced to be in that situation. And when they do opt for transactional sex, where they exchange sex for things like food, for things like pads, they're not even doing it in the safest way possible, safest means possible. It's unprotected. It makes them more vulnerable to other diseases as well. And while we're still talking about the example of someone looking for water, if you used to get water from this point and this stream has dried up, it means you're now walking longer distances. And we're not just talking about you being tired because you walked a longer distance. We're also talking about Langa not having enough time to do her schoolwork now, because we still want this water at home. I want this water in my household. Langa, you're my child. You have to get it. I don't care how long you have to walk to get it. If someone else can do it, so can you. It means girls don't have enough time to focus on productive things like their schoolwork, their education, learning, or other recreational activities that they can benefit from. And walking longer distances increases their risk, or puts them at a higher risk of being victims of sexual abuse. We read day in, day out of girls who are raped on their way to fetch water in rural areas, of girls who are attacked when they're getting firewood, or people who will say, well, I'll give you this bundle of firewood if you let me fondle your breast. And these are things that are caused by climate change, whether we like it or not. What other examples of effects of climate change do we have on girls in the urban setting, Chichi?
Maybe we can just take a look at, well, speaking from my side, as a young girl with albinism, we can look at the fact that typically I'm not supposed to be out in the sun because my skin reacts. I can have skin cancer in the long run and things like that. So we now look at the fact that naturally sunscreen is already like very expensive. Not everyone can afford that. And then now we're talking about maybe climate change. It's even worse. The temperatures are so high. At some point, I'll have to wear sunscreen either way. Like sometimes it's manageable. If the weather is okay, you can just get an umbrella. But maybe let's talk about how it's very hot and very windy. Umbrella doesn't work, the head doesn't work. So at some point you have to get sunscreen, and we're looking at the fact that it's expensive. So at the end of the day, I feel like my health is compromised because I can't get the sunscreen, my skin is reacting, and a whole lot of other things that I'm facing. You know, on top of just being a girl, like that's already a hardship. Now with this, it's just
a whole sport.
You know?
I don't think we're ready to have the sunscreen conversation. I remember one time I bought sunscreen for about $15 at a pharmacy, and it was a small tube.
They come in
it did not last me for long, but we need this because who wants to be suffering from skin cancer? It's not like you can tell the sun that, hey, can you like reduce the temperature? But this is happening whether we like it or not, you know. And this is me also thinking about things that are already not regarded as basic commodities for girls, skin products, menstrual health products.
They're considered as luxuries.
Like you wanna look pretty, you know. That's why you need all of this.
But no, I just want,
and it's okay to want to look pretty actually.
I just want protection from the sun. But more than that, if there's a flood or something, some natural disaster, that means schools have to be shut down or schools have been destroyed. We already have girls not having access to education, not having equal access to education. Things have just been made worse. If a school has been destroyed in this community, you now have to go to the next community to access that education, and you still have your chores that you have to do. Not that boys don't have chores, but we know of things like gender roles, and gender roles are real. We know who does the dishes at home. We know who does the cooking. We know who does the laundry. We know who nurtures the younger children at home. And on top of that, you now have to deal with a changed reality that wasn't there before. And it's okay for us to talk about people having lower yields. They don't get as many cobs of maize as they used to do. You know how our parents are always saying, so we got a lot of maize, we had amazambane, we had timbambaila, and they talk all these things that just sound like inganewane and folklore to us. For some people there is nothing left, they can't even get anything out, and now they depend on food aid. And then comes in corruption as well, where we now talk of food aid. But another alarming thing that girls have to face because of climate change is violence.
Yeah. I really like, I think you mentioned the fact Yoguti, when there's perhaps a drought, it becomes too dry. Our water sources for especially girls who live in the marginal rural areas, they're already far and they can be even further than that. So them having to travel long distances, I think you did mention that we read a lot of stories around, this girl was raped and women are encouraged to work in groups, which is not always practical because my mom has to be Emma Simini or taking care of the kids. We need to balance out chores. So it really becomes difficult for girls to feel safe wherever they are, really. And I also just wanted to add on you mentioned how sometimes these amateurs, they become more than they used to be because I have to take longer, to go and get water. And my schoolwork is starved of time. I am now at risk of not being as empowered and educated as I would have been. Resources are not even there, but the needs keep growing, greater and greater. And now you're thinking of, in the long run, this young girl, this young woman is no longer as empowered, right? They are economically disadvantaged, and that leaves them vulnerable to even issues like blessers, we are just the power imbalance becomes even greater even in the long run. So these issues are really
and we're not just talking about girls in Cholocho and Kai. We're talking about ourselves as well when we have water shedding right now. We know what happens when you go to those boreholes to get water. You're pushing that wheelbarrow. The violence that is there at those boreholes. You need to grow a thick skin or you need to get an okapi. Not that we're encouraging violence, but it's there, And sometimes you'll hear things like there's not enough pressure. Or when you go to these community tapes, amanza sekona, let's go. And someone is saying this at 7 p.m. We're in winter right now. It's getting darker. It's already so dark. But it's either that or you come and record a podcast without bathing. And now you have to choose those priorities. And what happens when you're now walking in the dark? You have a bucket of water or 2 buckets of water. You're trying to balance that. You have to go back to your schoolwork. If you're in primary school or high school, there is color. If you're in university, welcome to modularization. So wherever you go, it's just getting more and more and more and more difficult, and yet our needs are not being met. And speaking of violence, gender-based violence generally becomes worse or the cases increased. For example, in COVID-19, the cases increased because, if you're spending more time with your oppressor, you're going to get more oppressed. And in instances where people are being affected by climate change, do you know there are people who have lost their jobs because of climate change? Companies have shut down. The husband has been retrenched. He's sent back home. He doesn't feel much like a man before. And now he doesn't stop at beating up his wife. He extends that to his children as well,
And I feel like it really connects to even mental health, as you're saying, because of climate change, people lose their jobs. You're saying the man doesn't feel much of a man anymore. Depression generally starts to kick in. Like, what am I doing with my life? The family, the kids. I feel like it really affects everyone. The whole trauma of, we are living with this very angry man. We don't know how to behave around him. On top of that, we're hungry. There's no food. There's literally nothing. So at some point, it really even covers the issue of mental health. And speaking of boreholes and okapis, there was an incident recently where apparently someone got to the borehole and told people to actually, you know how there's always a queue and things like that. We don't have water in Bulawayo. So he gets there and he tells people to actually move back and allow him to get water, or he's going to literally use his okapi because he was even carrying it. So I was like, is this now a safe space? Like, looking at all this,
Definitely
people are out there via Lwalabantu, they want to get their monies and whatever, but now it's now water was literally
something so
being
basic.
stabbed because you need water. It's really crazy. Disheartening.
And you need water. You can't live without water. But there's violence when you think of going to get water. When you think of going to school is far, or school was affected, or some schools are not fully furbished, and we had more subjects being introduced in schools. We have schools in the urban setting that are conducting certain lessons under trees. You're sitting under a skinny tree that doesn't have that much coverage, and it's hot, guys, but you're trying to learn. Or when we say we're doing agriculture in our schools around Bulawayo, it's basically kids being standing in the sun and suffering. And fair and fine, you may say, well, our schools in Bulawayo have lawn, but we know how lawns are called green deserts. It's green, it's fine, we're standing in the fields there, but it's hot. It's very hot. Learning is becoming difficult. And these small things, when we add them up, they compound to significantly affect us. We become more economically disenfranchised. When you speak of education, the gap is wider. When you talk of the digital divide, it's getting wider. Everything is just getting worse. And what happens, of course, in some more unfortunate instances, is that instances of child marriages increase. Okay, I'm out of a job. I need money to feed my family. I want to maintain the status of being usazvani in the community. I'm going to force my child to get married to get money. And this is for people who haven't even been affected by natural disasters. We're just talking about people losing their jobs because of climate change. When you talk of people who've been affected by natural disasters, the livestock is gone. And how do we get livestock in the rural setting in Zimbabwe? Through lobola. I have a 15-year-old girl who is being hit by puberty. I think it's okay for her to get married. And these aren't speculations that we're making. These are things that have been reported, real life stories. And I think I would want to go back again to education. When I was reading and doing some studies, even currently the government is conducting surveys to try and find out why there were schools that recorded 0% pass rate between 2021 and now. Do you know what 0% pass rate means? It means if we had 200 students sitting for an exam at Amplifying Girls Voices through Digital Arts High School, none of them passed their O-level. And when none of them pass their O-level, we know we usually have more girls than boys. What is going to happen to them? How many people are going to get jobs that are safe for them? How many people are not going to get those jobs? So now we have increased cases of teenage pregnancies, of unplanned pregnancies. We have a lot of girls getting out of school. And once you fail, our society that we live in, whether we like it or not, that is what is happening. You're a girl, I send you to school for you to fail. Forget all the things that are happening. And when we talk of COVID-19 is also a consequence of climate change because of the mutations that happen. So all these things just compound. We just have increased inequalities in education, in health, more violence against girls. Daily living conditions are not nice. We can't afford sunscreen and all these things. You don't have menstrual products. Even if you get donations that we have these days, we have a lot of period drives, period campaigns. People give you washable pads. What are you going to wash that pad with?
When the water
with what water? You don't have enough to cook.
Before we even go there, we look at the fact that they come with the pad drives, which is okay. They give you 2 packs of pads and then they disappear again. And pads and periods come every month. And you'd find out that those 2 packs are just for that 1 month. What do you do the other months?
What are you going to do afterwards? There's electricity shedding as well. And because of climate change that was caused by deforestation, we basically live in deserts. There's not even trees for you to cut down to get firewood. If you want trees, for example, if you stay in the New Luveve area, you're walking further into Country Park. Do you know how far Country Park is? And you're going to look for firewood in all these unsafe places, in all these unsafe spaces. And what does that mean for safety of girls? We're not safe already, all things being equal. You're not safe if you're sitting in a room with a male just because you're a girl. Not that I'm saying that all males are potential perpetrators, but we know what happens, and you want to report this person, but perhaps your perpetrator is the one who then gives you a lift to get this firewood, or even gets you gas. Gas is now a status symbol nowadays. It now differentiates those who suffer and those who don't suffer. And all these are things that are caused by climate change. And the unfair thing about climate change is that those who contribute the least are those who suffer the most.
It's very crazy. So I'm just thinking, what can I do differently, maybe, that can help me better, I don't know, I don't want to say better suffer, but better, adapt to the challenges that come with climate change.
I think this is when we now talk of green skills. Girls need to be trained in green skills, in green entrepreneurship. And sometimes this looks like you picking up water bottles in the CBD and selling them. This looks like you buying umni for 50 cents. How many seeds of umni in that 50-cent sachet? And growing all of that and selling those trees. These are the things that girls can now thrive on. It also looks like you planting plants that are more resistant to the conditions that we live in, so that you don't have to suffer. I need you to tell we know that whole conversation and chat about, and we have a good example in front of us. These don't need that much water. Exactly. You love your plants, you want to have something green around you. Plant things that are more tolerant to the conditions that we have. Plant more drought tolerant crops for those who depend a lot on agriculture, on subsistence agriculture. But I think more than anything, educate girls on how to take care of themselves, how they can mitigate. And maybe you can also check the things that we do. We love our deodorants, we love our perfumes, but some of them are not even good for the environment. So make sure it's certified. Is it ISO certification and things like that? But move into these green spaces, green entrepreneurship, because if our government has failed us in providing for programming for girls and funding for girls to fight climate change, if international funding and international and global governance has failed us, then the only people who can help us are ourselves, and we can craft our own solutions, and we can do it. And one of the things that we can do is to talk about these issues. So if you're watching this, you can even share your comment, share your lived experiences. Let us know what you think, because we are amplifying girls' voices through digital art. It's our job to talk about inequalities that girls face, and it's getting hot in here. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe. And what climate change effect have you faced?